Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Nerdy Multiverse and finally another breakdown. Today we actually have something new to the channel, but a universe I have always wanted to talk about on here, and that is The Walking Dead. As today we will be breaking down and giving our initial thoughts on the first ever episode of the brand new spin-off series that is following Negan and Maggie in New York, The Walking Dead: Dead City. And this first episode starts off as Maggie looks at the city through her binoculars, where we see the state of the city and the environment around it, the hordes dwelling in it, and what she and Negan will have to deal with throughout this series. She doesn't get to look for very long before having to hide from passing walkers, but as she does, a bloated walker, clearly one that has been residing near the water or in it and soaking it all into its skin, increasing its size, much like the well walker that we saw from Herschel's farm, ends up grabbing her from behind, but she quickly overpowers it and puts it down, in a scene that very much mirrors and resembles that of Negan's lineup kills, specifically Glenn's own death. After taking the walker out and catching her breath after practically raging, we cut to see the brand new intro and credits for this series, which was really cool, seeing the state of the city, Times Square, and the Statue of Liberty. Cutting back to the actual show as Maggie pulls up to a bar and a motel, where she grabs a couple of drinks as she tells a fake story about how her cabin was overrun by groaners. Clearly another new name for walkers that the locals here must refer to them as. Clearly she is up to something and fishing for information, as the bartender tells her of a man who specializes in taking care of groaners the best he has ever seen. This is likely referring to Negan. She asks where the restroom is as she pretends to go to it, but instead wipes a smile straight off of her face and walks to the motel area, wandering into a room where she finds a bracelet and a knife on an end table, with a man sitting in the shower. And this is clearly Negan, as we see later on, but we can also tell from the tattoo on the man's arm and the bracelet on the end table. She is evidently after Negan for an unknown reason, at least that is what we know for now, but we do end up learning why she is later on in the episode. But she gets caught before she enters the shower room, however, by the girl we saw at the bar in the beginning of the episode and some of her men, and is close to paying the price for snooping around. But she ends up kicking the table, which activates a hidden knife in her boot to come out, Laura Kinney style or Assassin's Creed style. Super cool weaponry, by the way, but she ends up taking the captors down as Negan runs in, looks at her, and runs out. Before chasing after him, she gets tripped over by a girl who is also with Negan, quickly leaving and getting back in the truck to drive after the two, leaving behind a piece of the navigation book she has of New York. She catches up to Negan and the girl in the truck, and her and Negan get into a very short scuffle, with Maggie keeping her knife at his throat, and this basically being their reunion. Cutting to a bit later, and we see that Negan is holding a wanted poster of himself as the Babylon Marshals are after him. And we learn that this girl with Negan is named Ginny, and she does not talk at all. He introduces her to Maggie and says that him and Maggie are old acquaintances, being the title of this episode. Maggie ends up asking Negan where Annie and his kid are, and he completely avoids the question. Now, I doubt that they would have killed Annie and Negan's kid with her off, especially off screen after the end of the original series, so I am assuming that either something could have happened between them and Annie took their kid and left to keep it safe, or the two have also been taken, but by somebody else, and that is why Negan is also out here. But I would say that it's more likely that Annie took their kid and left to keep their kid safe, especially after she was put into a lineup herself by the Commonwealth and nearly killed while pregnant with their kid. Maggie tells him the reason that she's after him and why she actually needs him and his help, as a few weeks back she got raided, which could mean Hilltop did, or another settlement she was at with Herschel, which she did start doing a lot after she met Georgie and the twins, so I would not be surprised if it was not Hilltop that got raided. She tells them that they were outnumbered and overpowered, and whoever it was that raided them took their rations, and the next time that they came back for more, 1 month later, they ended up taking her and Glenn's son Herschel as hostage, and she has been tracking them ever since. Now they reside in Manhattan. Negan, as well as all of us, wonder how Negan even fits into the situation, but it turns out that the man who raided them and took her Herschel, known as the Croat, is actually a former savior himself, and she knows so as before everything happened, he did the iconic Negan whistle that we all can remember, for better or for worse. Negan states that if it is the same Croat that he remembers, Herschel is likely to already be dead, as the Croat was one of the many crazy or psychotic people a part of the Saviors, but he was one that stood out exceptionally. Obviously, Maggie thinks that Negan is required to help her out because he owes her. He asks her if there's still a decent setup at Hilltop, like a school, likely asking for Jenny, so she says that she will have her put up or moved there to have a safe and secure future with the other kids that are there, like Judith, RJ, Gracie, and so on. Anyways, they head into New Babylon and stake out for a bit, waiting for one of Maggie's people to come and pick up Jenny. This is where we learn that Jenny is in fact a mute character and that she has not spoken a word ever since she found her own father dead and how he was killed by another person or a group. Jenny gets picked up by one who we can just call Maggie's contact, and then we cut back to the bar and motel location from earlier, but now it is nighttime as a New Babylon marshals show up. And I love these old western sort of styled outfits that they are wearing, specifically Pearly. Of course, they're here looking for Negan as he is wanted for killing a magistrate and a few other people, but nobody is giving them any information, so he takes the leader outside against a fence full of walkers to force her to speak up. She owns up and tells Marshal Armstrong, or Pearly, that Negan was there, and then one of the other bar residents speaks up for her and gives the information on the truck that they were driving in. Unfortunately, not only is he drinking and such illegal and punishable by execution here, very harsh, but so is the fact that she aided and embedded with Negan. So he tosses her through the fence to be devoured by the walkers. Quickly cutting back to Negan and Maggie as he asks her to look after Jenny after all of this is over and done with, because he will not be going back to her, unlike what he just promised her. And I wonder why. Maybe he doesn't want anything to do with having the responsibility of being a father or a father figure for somebody, or he just doesn't want to be at the Hilltop for his past, which is where I can assume Jenny was taken to after Maggie's comments earlier. Then going back to the bar again, right before the marshals leave to track down Negan and Maggie, Pearly finds the navigation book that Maggie left behind and discovers a page that she ripped out was Manhattan's. So now he knows exactly where they are headed. Maggie begins having flashbacks to Glenn's death and getting flashes of Herschel screaming for her help, representing not just how much she is still affected by Glenn's death, but how she is scared that Herschel could face the same outcome. Waking up from the nightmare as Negan begins talking about his own father and how he was meant to go and see the Statue of Liberty with him, but his father never lived up to his promise, and how he used to have a little souvenir of the Statue of Liberty. This definitely means that Negan will get to see it in the series. The usual tension between the two happens as he tells her that he could kill her right now if he wanted to, but Maggie assures him that she would have to kill him first. But of course, she needs him to get her son back. They start getting the boat ready to head to Manhattan, but the marshals get to their location, so in the dark, they capture one of the marshals, Grits, and take him as a hostage so that the others cannot fire on them. We see that Pearly is holding a piece of paper that reads off an address: Oliver Street, apartment 505. Now I think that this could be a sort of hideout for the marshals in Manhattan, or something else. I guess we'll have to find out. Holding Grits hostage, Maggie orders him to remove everything from his pockets, even though he has not even reached the rank to even receive a firearm yet from the marshals. He pulls out a medicine bottle and tries to explain it's for his grandmother, but Negan does not buy this quote-unquote sob story and threatens to throw him overboard, as he is a liability and a threat. Maggie and Negan end up getting into an argument, as usual, about how Negan's the bad guy and such and for what he's done, but he reminds her and asks her to remind herself, how many husbands and fathers has she killed herself? Something that will reflect on her later on in the episode. Finally arriving onto Manhattan, which seems like a complete ghost town. Grits even asks where all of the chompers are, as there are none wandering the streets. And now that they are here, they begin walking through the city, but the minute that Grits Grits tries to make a run for it and makes some noise, the walkers, or what we call the chompers in this area, show up, as they begin falling from the sky, as Negan says. We can also see that somebody else is watching over them from a building above. They get into cover, but it turns out that the building that they are hiding near is filled with walkers itself, so they have to move as more and more walkers continue dropping to the streets. Finally, in the clear, they walk through the city again, passing by some graffiti, inviting others to a killing at the Lincoln Center, and then nearly walking right into a trap where Negan practically saves Maggie's life, as she did not even notice it. They get to a barricade or a wall that is made of buses, which turns out to be a trap itself, as a vehicle drives by playing loud music, leading a horde right towards them. They try hiding, but bugs coming from a carcass keep crawling all over them, so they have to move again, especially after they start getting shot at by the marshals, who are right on their tail now, making it into a laundromat-like building where they hide, as the marshals make it inside too and are now blocking their escape. Marshal Pearlie Armstrong introduces himself as he searches a building for them, specifically speaking to Maggie. He tells her that he has a wife and 3 daughters and they are his everything. A walker ends up attacking Grits, and something I noticed here but haven't really seen anyone else talk about is that this may in fact be the first mutated walker that we see in the series, as there is a rat sort of infused in its mouth and it too is trying to chomp down on Grits. Negan ends up putting it down there though, before reminding Grits to follow his orders. But it's too late for Grits, as Grits is shot and killed by his own fellow marshal Pearlie, so Negan makes a run for it as Pearlie follows right behind him, with Maggie sneaking up right behind Pearlie. But Pearlie takes note of this and the two get into a short scuffle, with Pearlie nearly winning it even after Maggie tries to use her awesome boot knife again, but she ends up weaponizing her ring necklace and takes his gun and knocks him out. As she is about to beat him to death with it after, she stops herself as Negan watches. And this is all because of what Negan said earlier to her about how many fathers and husbands she has killed herself, because Pearlie made it clear to her that he himself had a wife and kids as well. They end up making it into another room and locking the door behind them, as Negan lights a match before it gets blown out by a lady waiting in the room with them, who I believe is the same person that was watching them from the building top when they are walking through the streets. And this is where we leave off with these characters. However, we cut to Herschel tied up to a chair and being held hostage. He's clearly in his teenage years now, likely around the age of 14 or 15, where finally the villain, the Croat, shows up. An older man with a distinct accent. He makes a remark that Herschel is acting tough, just as his father or possibly mother would as well. And I won't even lie to you, Herschel reminded me a lot of Glenn in this sequence. The Croat is clearly a very sick and twisted man and goes through a collection of torturing tools. But before he can start his torture on Herschel though, a man walks in and informs him that another one of their hostages has escaped. Now before we continue on with that, something that we can take notice of here of the Croat is that his right ear is completely missing and mutilated. Now this obviously could have been any sort of injury, but the fact that he used to be a savior sticks out to me here. As we know, Dwight's face was burnt in the furnace by Negan as a punishment. So I wonder if that is what happened to the Croat as well. Back to the actual episode though, as the other now escaped hostage makes a run for it on the rooftops, we can see that the shot from the trailer that looked like a parkour walker was actually just this guy. Anyways though, he ends up making it to a zip line, something we will be seeing a lot of in the series, where he puts on the attachment and attempts to zipline away, before the Croat cuts the cable, causing the man to fall to his death 20 stories high. Now I believe they actually call him the Croat because he speaks the Croatian language here, which would in point be very simple but yet very unique. And this episode ends off as he looks down to the streets where the man fell to his doom, saying something in the Croatian language. And wow, this episode was absolutely an incredible start to this new spin-off series. The dynamics between the characters, this new cruel villain, and the refreshing sort of feel to this universe of characters was great. And the only sort of nitpick that I had with this episode was that a lot of the scenes were extremely dark colored even when it wasn't nighttime. But that doesn't really matter, and everything else outweighed that stuff. Very great start to a series, and I cannot wait for the second episode. But of course, I would like to hear about your thoughts on this episode as well, so make sure to leave them down below. Thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed our breakdown and review on this episode, don't forget to give it a like. And with that being said, we will see you all the next time that we go through and explore the nerdy multiverse.